Welcome back, everyone, to Occult Archives, the deep dive, where we kind of pull back the curtain on history's most, let's say, intriguing books.
Yeah, intriguing is a good word for them.
Definitely. We're not talking like those bestsellers you find at the airport, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're dealing with the kind of books that have been, well, whispered about for centuries, sometimes with like a sense of awe, other times with outright fear.
Right, the ones that end up chained to lecterns or are hidden in restricted sections.
Exactly. And today, it's your curiosity, listeners, that has really brought us face to face with a real head scratcher, a book called A Suggestive Inquiry into the Hermetic Mystery by Anne Atwood.
Episode 197, everybody, The Living Fire.
Exactly. And let's be honest, the term Hermetic Mystery kind of throws up all these images of, like secret societies, hidden rituals, forbidden knowledge, that sort of thing.
It's definitely got that air of mystery.
Totally. But like you mentioned, Atwood's work is called an inquiry, right? So it's not just a book of spells or, like a how-to manual for alchemy. It's more like a deep dive into the philosophy behind it all.
It's like she's inviting us to explore these concepts alongside her, to unravel these tangled threads of symbolism and secrecy.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to try to do today. No summoning demons or trying to spin gold out of straw in the studio, I promise.
Yeah, no explosions today, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. No, but seriously, what we want to figure out is, what does Atwood believe this Hermetic art actually is? And to do that, we're going to have to, look at where it came from, the people who practiced it, what they were really focusing on, and why they used such, well, let's say creative language.
I like the way you put that. Creative.
Had to be diplomatic, right? But yeah, you've come armed with Atwood's book, so let's spark this living fire and see where it leads us, eh?
Sounds good to me. Now, to grasp what Atwood's getting at, it helps to start with the historical backdrop she paints. She points us right away to this legendary text, the Smaragdine Table, better known as the Emerald Tablet.
Ah, the Emerald Tablet. I've heard whispers.
It's pretty much the foundational text for Hermeticism, supposedly holds the core principles of the art, packed into just a few cryptic lines.
Cryptic, you say? Like Riddle of the Sphinx kind of cryptic.
Even more so, maybe. Atwood even includes Kircher's Latin translation of it, pointing out that it was originally translated from Arabic and Greek copies. So you can already see these ideas have been bouncing around for centuries across different cultures and languages.
Okay, so this Emerald Tablet, what's the big deal about it? What kind of ideas are we talking about here?
Well, the key takeaway is this principle of universal correspondence. That famous phrase, as above, so below? That pretty much sums it up.
I have heard that one, yeah. But what's it actually mean, though?
So imagine it like this. The universe is like a giant mirror, reflecting itself at every level. So whatever's happening in the stars, you can find echoes of it here on Earth, even within us.
Whoa, that's kind of trippy when you think about it.
It really is. And this whole idea of a unified reality, this connection between the macrocosm and the microcosm, it's a thread that runs through all of Hermetic thought.
Okay, that's making more sense now. But Atwood also talks about, how this knowledge wasn't always welcomed with open arms. There was a time when it was actually suppressed, right?
Oh, absolutely. Atwood talks about this really pivotal moment in history, around 284 AD, when the Roman Emperor Diocletian basically clamped down on what was then called chemical knowledge in Egypt.
Chemical knowledge. So we're talking about alchemy here.
Exactly. And the reason, well, according to the historian Suidas, it was because the Egyptians were rumored to have figured out how to create gold and silver.
I can see why that would make the emperor nervous.
Right. Imagine the power someone would have if they could just conjure up precious metals at will. They could fund armies, challenge the empire, you name it.
So Diocletian basically said, nope, not happening on my watch.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Suidas even mentions this edict that went out, ordering people to hand over all their books on the subject so they could be burned. It's a pretty stark reminder of how dangerous knowledge can be, especially when it falls into the wrong hands, or when it threatens the powers that be.
Book burning. Yeah, that's never a good sign. But did this attempt to erase this knowledge actually work? Did it stop these ideas from spreading?
It's hard to completely wipe out an idea, isn't it? I mean, sure, it probably drove the knowledge further underground, made it even more secretive, and forced people to rely more heavily on symbols and metaphors to protect their ideas.
Makes sense. Keep it hidden from prying eyes.
Exactly. But Atwood points to evidence that the art survived. She brings up that famous story about Cleopatra dissolving her pearl earring in strong vinegar.
Oh yeah, I've heard that story. But how does that prove anything?
Well, the story goes that only philosophers on the ground of nature knew how to do that. Meaning, people who understood the deeper principles of nature, like alchemists.
Ah, so it suggests that this knowledge, even if it was hidden, was still alive and well.
Right. And to add to that, there were even chemical treatises attributed to Cleopatra herself. Now, whether she actually wrote them or not is debatable, but it shows that this knowledge was still linked to her name, even centuries later.
So despite the suppression, the Hermetic tradition kept going like an underground stream. It makes you wonder, what exactly is this Hermetic philosophy anyway, and who were these people who were so drawn to it?
That's the million-dollar question. Atwood portrays Hermetic philosophers as, a breed apart, and she makes this fascinating observation about their writings.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So, on the surface, their writings can seem full of contradictions, right? But Atwood argues that there's a deeper meaning there, a shared understanding that connects them to some of the biggest names in ancient Greek philosophy. People like Anaxagoras, Plato, and Heraclitus.
So these weren't just isolated weirdos messing about with bubbling potions, right? There's a real philosophical foundation to their work.
Exactly. It was about more than just practical experimentation. They were grappling with some pretty deep questions about the nature of reality.
Okay, that makes sense. They were like the ancient philosophers, but with a more hands-on approach.
You could say that. And to support this idea, Atwood even mentions these epistles about the philosopher's stone that were attributed to Aristotle.
Hold on, Aristotle. Like the tutor of Alexander the Great, Aristotle?
The one and only. And then there's the Secretorum. Have you heard of that one?
Rings a bell, but I can't place it.
It's this medieval text that was supposedly written by Aristotle as advice to Alexander. And it touches on some pretty esoteric topics. Now, whether he actually wrote it is up for debate, but it was widely considered genuine for centuries. And this shows how these concepts, even if they were veiled in secrecy, were being discussed and debated in intellectual circles, even by people like Aristotle.
Wow, so these ideas were circulating in some pretty high places.
They were. Atwood even points to Aristotle's Book of Meteors as hinting at deeper causes behind natural phenomena. It's like they were trying to peer behind the curtain of everyday reality to understand the hidden mechanisms driving the universe.
Okay, so we established that this wasn't just about mixing potions. There was a real intellectual and philosophical depth to it. But Atwood also makes it clear that not everyone claiming to be a Hermetic philosopher was the real deal, right?
Oh, definitely. She makes a point of distinguishing between the true adepts, the ones who had genuinely mastered the art, and the pretenders. She talks about how some people got caught up in specific substances, like salts or niters, thinking they held the key to everything.
Kind of like chasing after fool's gold.
Exactly. They were missing the forest for the trees. And then there were those who were just straight-up con artists, using alchemy to trick people out of their money.
So like alchemists selling fake elixirs or promising to turn lead into gold for a hefty fee.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And their shenanigans gave the whole field a bad reputation.
I can imagine. So it was a mixed bag with genuine seekers alongside charlatans.
Right. And Atwood stresses that it's not just about the external process, it's about the inner state of the practitioner. She says the true adepts were driven by this deep desire for knowledge and understanding, for a pure connection to the divine.
So their motivation had to be pure, not driven by greed or the desire for power.
Exactly. She even quotes this saying about Albertus Magnus, a Dominican friar and alchemist. They said he was magnus in magia, great in magic, major in philosophia, greater in philosophy, maximus in theologia, greatest in theology.
So the true alchemists weren't just skilled in the art, they were also wise and spiritually grounded.
Right. It was about harmonizing the different aspects of yourself, the physical, the intellectual, and the spiritual. It was a holistic pursuit.
That makes sense. But if these adepts truly possessed this profound knowledge, why all the secrecy? Why were their writings so deliberately obscure and cryptic?
Atwood argues that this deliberate obscurity was like a protective measure. It was their way of safeguarding this powerful knowledge from falling into the wrong hands.
Kind of like a test to weed out the unworthy.
Exactly. They packed their writings with metaphors and allegories so that only those who were truly dedicated, the ones who were willing to put in the work, could decipher the real meaning.
It was like a secret code.
Right. You had to earn the right to understand it. She compares it to the riddle of the Sphinx. Only those with the right knowledge and the right spiritual orientation could unlock the secrets.
So what you're saying is we can't just read these texts at face value. We have to dig deeper, understand the symbolism and the hidden language.
Exactly. It's about reading between the lines, looking for the deeper truths concealed beneath the surface.
All right, I'm up for the challenge. Now let's get to the heart of it. What was the main focus of this Hermetic art?
Atwood points to this concept of the one thing as being central to the whole thing. It's often given all sorts of cryptic names, like our Argent Vive. But the really fascinating part is how paradoxically it's described. It's a stone, but not a stone.
Water.
But not water.
Now that's what I call cryptic.
It is, right. But these paradoxical descriptions are kind of like a pointer, directing you towards something that's beyond our normal way of thinking. It's this primordial, undifferentiated substance, the very essence of creation, before it takes on specific forms. It's like the raw material of the universe, full of potential.
I think I need a diagram for this one.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. The thing is, they believe that this one thing contained everything, spirit, soul, and body. It was the ultimate unity of existence.
So it's like the seed from which everything else grows.
Exactly. And it's not just some abstract concept. Atwood actually brings up Arnold de Villanova, a prominent alchemist, who describes this one thing and warns about its poisonous nature.
Wait, poisonous. So this fundamental essence of creation is dangerous too.
It's about balance, right? Just like fire can warm you or burn you, this one thing has the potential for both creation and destruction. It's about learning to harness its power responsibly.
So it's not something to be trifled with.
Definitely not. And it's not static either. It has to be transformed, refined, perfected. And this is where the alchemical work comes in.
Okay, so this one thing is the starting point. What happens next?
Well, Atwood introduces this idea of the mercurial quintessence. She compares it to light and heat, which can blend with things without becoming corrupted or losing their essence. So this one thing, like light and heat, has the potential to create a vast array of forms without itself becoming fragmented or impure.
Okay, that's kind of making sense, but I'm still a little lost, to be honest.
I get it, it's complicated stuff. But think of it like this. You have this initial unified matter, and then, through a process they call philosophical contrition, it's broken down, purified. And from this purification, three key principles emerge: salt, sulfur, and mercury.
Hold on, I thought we were talking about something beyond the physical realm.
We are. But remember, in alchemy, they used everyday substances to represent deeper spiritual principles.
So these aren't the salt, sulfur, and mercury we're familiar with.
Not exactly. Think of them more like fundamental forces or qualities within matter. They represent the active, passive, and mediating principles that govern creation.
Okay, I'm following. Break down, purify, and then these three principles emerge. Got it. But then Atwood throws in this whole bunch of other names for this one thing. Why so many different terms? It's like they were trying to confuse us on purpose.
Well, remember, secrecy was a big part of this tradition, but it wasn't just about keeping outsiders in the dark. Each name, like our great elixir, azot, basilisk, cockatrice, mercury of metalline essence, eagle, toad, each one highlighted a different aspect of the substance or a different stage in its transformation.
So it's like they were trying to capture this incredibly complex concept using every tool in their linguistic toolbox.
Exactly. The basilisk and cockatrice, for example, with their mythical power to kill with a glance, they represented the immense transformative energy contained within this one thing.
It's like each metaphor offers a different glimpse into this incredibly elusive essence.
Precisely. It's a language designed to make you think, to make you work for the understanding.
Now, I can't help but notice Atwood talking about philosophic fire and moist fire. These aren't your average campfire flames, are they?
Not quite. These are key ideas in the alchemical process. Philosophic fire isn't necessarily literal fire, but refers to the specific type of internal heat or energy that fuels the transformation.
Internal heat. So not something you could measure with a thermometer.
Right. It's about activating the potential within the matter, not just burning it up. And then there's moist fire, an even more subtle concept. This fire doesn't destroy, it nourishes and reveals. It's like a gentle heat that coaxes the hidden essence to the surface.
So we're talking about a very controlled and specific application of energy here.
Exactly. And the ultimate aim of applying these fires is to unveil what they called the rhodex, the root or fundamental nature of the substance.
And this brings us to the legendary philosopher's stone, right? Atwood describes it using this evocative biblical phrase, ruach Elohim, that moved upon the face of the waters.
That's a powerful image, isn't it? By connecting it to ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, Atwood elevates the concept far beyond just a material substance.
It's not just about turning lead into gold anymore, is it?
Not at all. She's saying that the philosopher's stone is this universal divine essence born in the virgin womb of the greater world. It's not just about transmuting metals. It's about a profound spiritual transformation that mirrors the creation of the universe itself.
Wow, so the stakes just got a whole lot higher.
They did, didn't they? It's clear that this Hermetic art was about so much more than just material transmutation. It had a deep spiritual dimension, a connection to the divine that went far beyond the physical realm.
So what was the ultimate goal of this great work, as they called it? What were they really trying to achieve?
Atwood makes it clear that the great work had both internal and external components. It wasn't just about manipulating physical substances in a lab, it was also about a parallel process of inner transformation.
So it's like an outer and an inner alchemy happening simultaneously.
Exactly. She emphasizes this quote, opus vobiscum et apud est, which means the work is with you and near.
So the real work is happening within the alchemists themselves.
Right. And a key concept in this inner transformation is separation, which Paracelsus, the famous alchemist and physician, considered the greatest miracle in philosophy.
Okay, so what exactly are we separating here?
Think of it like this. It's like the trials and ordeals in ancient mystery traditions. It involves breaking down and purifying the initial matter, separating the pure from the impure. The impure parts, the base metals, symbolically represent the negative qualities within the alchemist, the things that hold them back from spiritual progress.
So it's about purging those impurities to reveal the true essence within.
Precisely. Atwood likens this process to death and resurrection, with the impure aspects undergoing a kind of decomposition, while the pure essence, like ether, is resurrected into light.
Sounds intense.
It was. And this process of separation wasn't just a one-time thing. It was something that had to be repeated over and over again. Atwood describes it as philosophic sublimation.
Sublimation, like when a solid turns directly into a gas.
It's similar, but with a deeper meaning. In this context, it's about refining and elevating the matter with each cycle, urging the life force within it to overcome death and disintegration. It's about a constant striving for perfection, pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Sounds like a pretty arduous journey.
It was. And it wasn't always pleasant. Atwood even talks about the gate of putrefaction, which sounds pretty gruesome.
Gate of putrefaction? That doesn't sound like a place I'd want to visit.
It wasn't supposed to be a walk in the park. It represented this dark, terrifying stage in the process where everything seems to break down and decay. It's like facing your own shadow self, confronting your deepest fears and limitations.
But necessary for transformation.
Exactly. You can't have rebirth without death.
That's a theme that echoes across many spiritual traditions. So, after going through all that, what's the end result? What's this glorified body that Atwood mentions?
She describes it as a radiant, perfected form, like a shining carbuncle. It's not necessarily a literal physical change in the everyday sense, but a state of ultimate spiritual purification and illumination. It's about achieving this radiant inner being, a being of pure light and awareness.
It sounds like the alchemists weren't just trying to transform matter, they were trying to transform themselves.
Absolutely. They saw the external work as a reflection of the inner work, a way of mirroring and understanding the deeper processes of spiritual development.
It's fascinating how Atwood connects this whole Hermetic tradition back to ancient mysteries and philosophies. It wasn't just some isolated fringe movement.
Not at all. She points out how many ancient schools of theosophy were grounded in a similar understanding of the universe, a similar approach to knowledge and transformation. She even draws parallels between the alchemical process and the rituals and experiences of ancient mystery traditions like the Eleusinian mysteries.
I've heard of those. Weren't they some kind of secret initiation rites?
They were. And they involve similar themes of purification, facing trials, and ultimately attaining wisdom and enlightenment. Atwood sees the alchemical work as a modern-day continuation of these ancient quests for self-knowledge and union with the divine.
So the alchemists were like modern-day initiates into these ancient mysteries.
In a sense, yes. They were tapping into these timeless truths, these perennial paths to spiritual awakening.
And Atwood brings up Plato's ideas about pure light and the concept of uniting with the divine, which suggests that they were aiming for a higher state of consciousness, a direct experience of the divine.
Right. She even connects the Hermetic Art to the biblical idea of knowing and feeling God, referencing that famous line, "Seek and ye shall find."
It's clear that this wasn't just a purely intellectual exercise. It was about a deep and personal relationship with the divine.
Exactly. And she also talks about this concept of the spiritual sun, which is fascinating.
The spiritual sun, I'm curious, what's that all about?
It's also known as the astrum solis, and it represents this inner light of intellect, of pure understanding, that exists within each of us. It's like the radiant core of our consciousness, the source of true wisdom and insight.
So it's not just about external knowledge, it's about cultivating this inner light.
Precisely. The alchemists believed that by purifying and refining themselves, by aligning their will with the divine will, they could awaken this spiritual sun within and attain true enlightenment.
Okay, so even with all the emphasis on physical processes and substances, the ultimate goal was about inner transformation.
Absolutely. It was about using the outer work to understand and perfect the inner work.
Now, you can't talk about alchemy without addressing the role of will and intellect. Atwood seems to suggest that simply following a recipe isn't enough, right?
Right. She emphasizes the importance of aligning one's will with the divine will. She's basically saying that you can't just force your will upon the universe. You have to surrender to a higher purpose, a higher guidance. Otherwise, you're going to end up messing things up.
Makes sense. And what about intellect?
She acknowledges the importance of the intellect, but also points out its limitations. She says we need something more, a more penetrative spirit to truly grasp the depths of this art.
Spirit, meaning?
Think of it like a higher form of intuition, a divine inspiration that goes beyond the limitations of rational thought. It's about tapping into a deeper level of knowing, a knowing that comes from the heart as much as from the head.
So it's about balancing intellect with intuition and aligning both with the divine. And Atwood also mentions prayer and these rituals they called dephurgic rites. What were those all about?
Phrygic rites were essentially magical practices that involved things like invocation and prayer. They were about actively engaging with the divine, petitioning for guidance and support.
So they weren't just relying on their own knowledge and skill, they were seeking help from higher powers.
Exactly. They understood that this work was too great, too profound to be undertaken alone. They needed divine assistance to navigate the complexities and dangers of the path.
It really highlights the spiritual depth of this Hermetic tradition.
It does. And it shows that they weren't just messing about in a lab. They were engaging in a deeply spiritual practice, a practice that required humility, surrender, and a profound connection to the divine.
Finally, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the language. We've touched on the secrecy aspect, but there seems to be more to it than just keeping things hidden, doesn't there?
Definitely. The metaphors, the allegories, the seemingly contradictory language, it's all part of a deliberate strategy to encode the knowledge and guide the reader's understanding.
Okay, give me some examples.
Well, Atwood talks about symbols like the lion and the eagle, Sol and Luna, mythological figures, all of which represent specific substances, processes, or principles within the alchemical work. She even says that the descriptions of the first matter, that one thing we talked about, are transmutable adjective forms.
Transmutable adjective forms, what does that even mean?
It means that the language is fluid, intentionally vague. It's not about pinning down a single fixed substance, but rather about describing its ever-changing qualities as it goes through the process of transformation.
So you can't just take these texts literally.
Exactly. They're meant to be contemplated, meditated upon, wrestled with.
It's like they were trying to teach you how to think, not just what to think.
Exactly. Atwood cautions against reading these texts at face value. She's saying that you have to understand the underlying principles, the experiential reality of the work, to unlock the true meaning hidden within the metaphors and symbols. It's a language designed for initiates, not for the casual reader.
So it was a way of ensuring that the knowledge would only be revealed to those who were ready for it.
Precisely.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into Atwood's suggestive inquiry, I think it's safe to say that the Hermetic Mystery is much more than just turning lead into gold. It's a profound exploration of the universe, of consciousness, and of the human potential for transformation.
Absolutely. It's a journey that takes you to the depths of your being, challenges your assumptions, and ultimately leads you to a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you.
And that deliberate obscurity, though frustrating at times, is actually part of the process, right? It's designed to make you think critically, to engage with the material on a deeper level, and ultimately to come to your own understanding.
It's about uncovering the truths that are hidden within yourself, not just blindly accepting what's presented to you.
The alchemists believed that true knowledge wasn't something that could be simply handed over. It had to be earned, wrestled with, and ultimately experienced firsthand.
Exactly.
And the connections Atwood draws to history, philosophy, and ancient mystery traditions show that this Hermetic quest is part of a much larger, ongoing human story. It's about seeking those universal truths that lie hidden beneath the surface of things and using that knowledge to transform ourselves and the world.
It's a journey that's as relevant today as it was centuries ago.
Absolutely.
We hope this exploration has sparked some new insights for you, our listeners, and perhaps even ignited a desire to delve deeper into these mysteries yourselves.
What resonated most with you? What aspects of the Hermetic art do you find most intriguing? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Because, as Atwood reminds us, this deep dive is just the beginning.
The Hermetic Mystery, with all its layers of symbolism, its philosophical depth, and its transformative potential, continues to beckon those who are willing to venture beyond the surface.
Thank you for joining us in the Occult Archives.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking the living fire within.